Vaishnava disciplines. After completing the Tantric sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna followed the Brahmani in the disciplines of Vaishnavism. The Vaishnavas are worshippers of Vishnu, the all pervading, the supreme God, who is also known as Hari and Narayana. Of Vishnu's various incarnations, the two with the largest number of followers are Rama and Krishna. Vaishnavism is exclusively a religion of bhakti. Bhakti is intense love of God, attachment to Him alone. It is of the nature of bliss and bestows upon the lover immortality and liberation. God, according to Vaishnavism, cannot be realized through logic or reason, and without bhakti, all penances, austerities, and rites are futile. Man cannot realize God by self exertion alone. For the vision of God, His grace is absolutely necessary, and this grace is felt by the pure of heart. The mind is to be purified through bhakti. The pure mind then remains forever immersed in the ecstasy of God vision. It is the cultivation of this divine love that is the chief concern of the Vaishnava religion. There are three kinds of formal devotion: tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. If a person, while showing devotion to God, is actuated by malevolence, arrogance, jealousy, or anger, then his devotion is tamasic, since it is influenced by tamas, the quality of inertia. If he worships God from a desire for fame or wealth, or from any other worldly ambition, then his devotion is rajasic, since it is influenced by rajas, the quality of activity. But if a person loves God without any thought of material gain, if he performs his duties to please God alone and maintains toward all created beings the attitude of friendship, then his devotion is called sattvic, since it is influenced by sattva, the quality of harmony. But the highest devotion transcends the three gunas or qualities, being a spontaneous, uninterrupted inclination of the mind toward God, the inner soul of all beings, and it wells up in the heart of a true devotee as soon as he hears the name of God or mention of God's attributes. A devotee possessed of this love would not accept the happiness of heaven if it were offered him. His one desire is to love God under all conditions, in pleasure and pain, life and death, honor and dishonor, prosperity and adversity. There are two stages of bhakti. The first is known as Vaidhi Bhakti, or love of God qualified by scriptural injunctions. For the devotees of this stage are prescribed regular and methodical worship, hymns, prayers, the repetition of God's name, and the chanting of His glories. This lower bhakti in course of time matures into para bhakti or supreme devotion, known also as prema, the most intense form of divine love. Divine love is an end in itself. It exists potentially in all human hearts, but in the case of bound creatures, it is misdirected to earthly objects. To develop the devotee's love for God, Vaishnavism humanizes God. God is to be regarded as the devotee's parent, master, friend, child, husband, or sweetheart, each succeeding relationship representing an intensification of love. These bhavas or attitudes toward God are known as Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, and Madhur. The rishis of the Vedas, Hanuman, the cowherd boys of Vrindavan, Rama's mother Kaushalya, and Radhika, Krishna's sweetheart, exhibited respectively the most perfect examples of these forms. In the ascending scale, the glories of God are gradually forgotten, and the devotee realizes more and more the intimacy of divine communion. Finally, he regards himself as the mistress of his beloved, and no artificial barrier remains to separate him from his ideal. No social or moral obligation can bind to the earth his soaring spirit. He experiences perfect union with the Godhead. Unlike the Vedantist, who strives to transcend all varieties of the subject object relationship, a devotee of the Vaishnava path wishes to retain both his own individuality and the personality of God. To him, God is not an intangible absolute, but the Purushottama, the Supreme Person. While practicing the discipline of the Madhur Bhava, the male devotee often regards himself as a woman. in order to develop the most intense form of love for Sri Krishna, the only Purusha or man in the universe. This assumption of the attitude of the opposite sex has a deep psychological significance. It is a matter of common experience that an idea may be cultivated to such an intense degree that every idea alien to it is driven from the mind. This peculiarity of the mind may be utilized for the subjugation of the lower desires and the development of the spiritual nature. Now, the idea which is the basis of all desires and passions in a man is the conviction of his indissoluble association with a male body. If he can inoculate himself thoroughly with the idea that he is a woman, he can get rid of the desires peculiar to his male body. Again, the idea that he is a woman may in turn be made to give way to another higher idea, namely, that he is neither man nor woman, but the impersonal spirit. The impersonal spirit alone can enjoy real communion with the impersonal God. Hence, the highest realization of the Vaishnava draws close to the transcendental experience of the Vedantist. A beautiful expression of the Vaishnava worship of God through love is to be found in the Vrindavan episode of the Bhagavata. The gopis or milkmaids of Vrindavan regarded the 6-year-old Krishna as their beloved. They sought no personal gain or happiness from this love. They surrendered to Krishna their bodies, minds, and souls. Of all the gopis, Radhika or Radha, because of her intense love for him, was the closest to Krishna. She manifested Mahabhava and was united with her beloved. This union represents, through sensuous language, a super-sensuous experience. Sri Chaitanya, also known as Gauranga, Gora, or Nimai, born in Bengal in 1485 and regarded as an incarnation of God, is a great prophet of the Vaishnava religion. Chaitanya declared the chanting of God's name to be the most efficacious spiritual discipline for the Kali Yuga. Sri Ramakrishna, as the monkey human, had already worshipped God as his master. Through his devotion to Kali, he had worshipped God as his mother. He was now to take up the other relationships prescribed by the Vaishnava scriptures. Ram Lala. About the year 1864, there came to Dakshineshwar a wandering Vaishnava monk, Jatadhari, whose ideal deity was Rama. He always carried with him a small metal image of the deity, which he called by the endearing name of Ram Lala, the boy Rama. Toward his little image, he displayed the tender affection of Kausalya for her divine son, Rama. As a result of lifelong spiritual practice, he had actually found in the metal image the presence of his ideal. Ram Lala was no longer for him a metal image, but the living God. He devoted himself to nursing Rama, feeding Rama, playing with Rama, taking Rama for a walk, and bathing Rama. And he found that the image responded to his love. Sri Ramakrishna, much impressed with his devotion, requested Jatadhari to spend a few days at Dakshineshwar. Soon Ram Lala became the favorite companion of Sri Ramakrishna too. Later on, he described to the devotees how the little image would dance gracefully before him, jump on his back, insist on being taken in his arms, run to the fields in the sun, pluck flowers from the bushes, and play pranks like a naughty boy. A very sweet relationship sprang up between him and Ram Lala, for whom he felt the love of a mother. One day, Jatadhari requested Sri Ramakrishna to keep the image and bade him adieu with tearful eyes. He declared that Ram Lala had fulfilled his innermost prayer and that he now had no more need of formal worship. A few days later, Sri Ramakrishna was blessed through Ram Lala with a vision of Ramachandra, whereby he realized that the Rama of the Ramayana, the son of Dashratha, pervades the whole universe as spirit and consciousness, that he is its creator, sustainer, and destroyer, that in still another aspect, he is the transcendental Brahman, without form, attribute, or name. While worshipping Ram Lala as the divine child, Sri Ramakrishna's heart became filled with the motherly tenderness, and he began to regard himself as a woman. His speech and gestures changed. He began to move freely with the ladies of Mathur's family, who now looked upon him as one of their own sex. During this time, he worshipped the Divine Mother as her companion or handmaid. In communion with the Divine Beloved, Sri Ramakrishna now devoted himself to scaling the most inaccessible and dizzy heights of dualistic worship, namely, the complete union with Sri Krishna as the beloved of the heart. He regarded himself as one of the gopis of Vrindavan, mad with longing for her divine sweetheart. At his request, Mathur provided him with woman's dress and jewelry. In this love pursuit, food and drink were forgotten. Day and night he wept bitterly. The yearning turned into a mad frenzy, for the divine Krishna began to play with him the old tricks he had played with the gopis. He would tease and taunt, now and then revealing himself, but always keeping at a distance. Sri Ramakrishna's anguish brought on a return of the old physical symptoms, the burning sensation, an oozing of blood through the pores, a loosening of the joints, and the stopping of physiological functions. The Vaishnava scriptures advise one to propitiate Radha and obtain her grace in order to realize Sri Krishna. So the tortured devotee now turned his prayer to her. Within a short time he enjoyed her blessed vision. He saw and felt the figure of Radha disappearing into his own body. He said later on, "It is impossible to describe the heavenly beauty and sweetness of Radha. Her very appearance showed that she had completely forgotten herself in her passionate attachment to Krishna. Her complexion was a light yellow. Now, one with Radha, he manifested the great ecstatic love, the Mahabhava, which had found in her its full expression." Later, Sri Ramakrishna said, "The manifestation in the same individual of the 19 different kinds of emotion for God is called in the books on Bhakti Mahabhava. An ordinary man takes a whole lifetime to express even a single one of these. But in this body, meaning himself, there has been a complete manifestation of all 19. The love of Radha is the precursor of the resplendent vision of Sri Krishna, and Sri Ramakrishna soon experienced that vision. The enchanting form of Krishna appeared to him and merged in his person. He became Krishna. He totally forgot his own individuality and the world. He saw Krishna in himself and in the universe. Thus he attained to the fulfillment of the worship of the personal God. He drank from the fountain of immortal bliss. The agony of his heart vanished forever. He realized Amrita, immortality, beyond the shadow of death. One day, listening to a recitation of the Bhagavata on the veranda of the Radhakanta temple, he fell into a divine mood and saw the enchanting form of Krishna. He perceived the luminous rays issuing from Krishna's lotus feet in the form of a stout rope, which touched first the Bhagavata and then his own chest, connecting all three, God, the scripture, and the devotee. After this vision, he used to say, "I came to realize that Bhagwan, Bhakta, and Bhagavata, God, devotee, and scripture, are in reality one and the same." Vedanta. The Brahmani was the enthusiastic teacher and astonished beholder of Sri Ramakrishna in his spiritual progress. She became proud of the achievements of her unique pupil. But the pupil himself was not permitted to rest. His destiny beckoned him forward. His divine mother would allow him no respite till he had left behind the entire realm of duality with its visions, experiences, and ecstatic dreams. But for the new ascent, the old tender guides would not suffice. The Brahmani, on whom he had depended for 3 years, saw her son escape from her to follow the command of a teacher with masculine strength, a sterner mien, a gnarled physique, and a virile voice. The new guru was a wandering monk, the sturdy Totapuri, whom Sri Ramakrishna learnt to address affectionately as Nangta, the naked one, because of his total renunciation of all earthly objects and attachments, including even a piece of wearing cloth. Totapuri was the bearer of a philosophy new to Sri Ramakrishna, the non-dualistic Vedanta philosophy, whose conclusions Totapuri had experienced in his own life. This ancient Hindu system designates the ultimate reality as Brahman, also described as Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, bliss absolute. Brahman is the only real existence. In it, there is no time, no space, no causality, no multiplicity. But through Maya, its inscrutable power, time, space, and causality are created, and the one appears to break into the many. The eternal spirit appears as a manifold of individuals endowed with form and subject to the conditions of time. The immortal becomes a victim of birth and death. The changeless undergoes change. The sinless pure soul, hypnotized by its own Maya, experiences the joys of heaven and the pains of hell. But these experiences, based on the duality of the subject object relationship, are unreal. Even the vision of a personal God is, ultimately speaking, as illusory as the experience of any other object. Man attains his liberation, therefore, by piercing the veil of Maya and rediscovering his total identity with Brahman. Knowing himself to be one with the universal spirit, he realizes ineffable peace. Only then does he go beyond the fiction of birth and death. Only then does he become immortal. And this is the ultimate goal of all religions, to dehypnotize the soul now hypnotized by its own ignorance. The path of the Vedantic discipline is the path of negation, neti, in which, by stern determination, all that is unreal is both negated and renounced. It is the path of jnana, knowledge, the direct method of realizing the absolute. After the negation of everything relative, including the discriminating ego itself, the aspirant merges in the one without a second. In the bliss of nirvikalpa samadhi, where subject and object are alike dissolved, the soul goes beyond the realm of thought. The domain of duality is transcended. Maya is left behind with all its changes and modifications. The real man towers above the delusions of creation, preservation, and destruction. An avalanche of indescribable bliss sweeps away all relative ideas of pain and pleasure, good and evil. There shines in the heart the glory of the eternal Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss absolute. Knower, knowledge, and known are dissolved in the ocean of one eternal consciousness. Love, lover, and beloved merge in the unbounded sea of supreme felicity. Birth, growth, and death vanish in infinite existence. All doubts and misgivings are quelled forever. The oscillations of the mind are stopped. The momentum of past actions is exhausted. Breaking down the ridge pole of the tabernacle in which the soul has made its abode for untold ages, stilling the body, calming the mind, drowning the ego, the sweet joy of Brahman wells up in that superconscious state. Space disappears into nothingness, time is swallowed in eternity, and causation becomes a dream of the past. Only existence is. Ah, who can describe what the soul then feels in its communion with the self? Even when man descends from this dizzy height, he is devoid of ideas of I and mine. He looks on the body as a mere shadow, an outer sheath encasing the soul. He does not dwell on the past, takes no thought for the future, and looks with indifference on the present. He surveys everything in the world with an eye of equality. He is no longer touched by the infinite variety of phenomena. He no longer reacts to pleasure and pain. He remains unmoved whether he, that is to say, his body, is worshipped by the good or tormented by the wicked. For he realizes that it is the one Brahman that manifests itself through everything. The impact of such an experience devastates the body and mind. Consciousness becomes blasted, as it were, with an excess of light. In the Vedanta books, it is said that after the experience of nirvikalpa samadhi, the body drops off like a dry leaf. Only those who are born with a special mission for the world can return from this height to the valleys of normal life. They live and move in the world for the welfare of mankind. They are invested with a supreme spiritual power. A divine glory shines through them. Totapuri. Totapuri arrived at the Dakshineshwar temple garden toward the end of 1864. Perhaps born in the Punjab, he was the head of a monastery in the province of India and claimed leadership of 700 sannyasis. Trained from early youth in the disciplines of the Advaita Vedanta, he looked upon the world as an illusion. The gods and goddesses of the dualistic worship were to him mere fantasies of the deluded mind. Prayers, ceremonies, rites, and rituals had nothing to do with true religion, and about these he was utterly indifferent. Exercising self-exertion and unshakable willpower, he had liberated himself from attachment to the sense objects of the relative universe. For 40 years, He had practiced austere discipline on the bank of the sacred Narmada and had finally realized his identity with the Absolute. Thenceforward, he roamed in the world as an unfettered soul, a lion free from the cage. Clad in a loincloth, he spent his days under the canopy of the sky, alike in storm and sunshine, feeding his body on the slender pittance of alms. He had been visiting the estuary of the Ganges. On his return journey along the bank of the sacred river, led by the inscrutable divine will, he stopped at Dakshineshwar. Totapuri, discovering at once that Sri Ramakrishna was prepared to be a student of Vedanta, asked to initiate him into its mysteries. With the permission of the Divine Mother, Sri Ramakrishna agreed to the proposal. But Totapuri explained that only a sannyasi could receive the teaching of Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna agreed to renounce the world, but with the stipulation that the ceremony of his initiation into the monastic order be performed in secret to spare the feelings of his old mother, who had been living with him at Dakshineshwar. On the appointed day, in the small hours of the morning, a fire was lighted in the Panchavati. Totapuri and Sri Ramakrishna sat before it. The flame played on their faces. Ramakrishna was a small brown man with a short beard and beautiful eyes, long dark eyes, full of light, obliquely set and slightly veiled, never very wide open, but seeing half crossed a great distance both outwardly and inwardly. His mouth was open over his white teeth in a bewitching smile, at once affectionate and mischievous. Of medium height, he was thin to emaciation and extremely delicate. His temperament was high-strung, for he was supersensitive to all the winds of joy and sorrow, both moral and physical. He was indeed a living reflection of all that happened before the mirror of his eyes, a two-sided mirror, turned both out and in. Facing him, the other rose like a rock. He was very tall and robust, a sturdy and tough oak. His constitution and mind were of iron. He was the strong leader of men. In the burning flame before him, Sri Ramakrishna performed the rituals of destroying his attachment to relatives, friends, body, mind, sense organs, ego, and the world. The leaping flame swallowed it all, making the initiate free and pure. The sacred thread and the tuft of hair were consigned to the fire, completing his severance from caste, sex, and society. Last of all, he burnt in that fire with all that is holy as his witness, his desire for enjoyment here and hereafter. He uttered the sacred mantras, giving assurance of safety and fearlessness to all beings, who were only manifestations of his own self. The rites completed, the disciple received from the Guru the loincloth and ochre robe, the emblems of his new life. The teacher and the disciple repaired to the meditation room nearby. Totapuri began to impart to Sri Ramakrishna the great truths of Vedanta. Brahman, he said, is the only reality, ever pure, ever illumined, ever free, beyond the limits of time, space, and causation. Though apparently divided by names and forms through the inscrutable power of Maya, that enchantress who makes the impossible possible, Brahman is really one and undivided. When a seeker merges in the beatitude of Samadhi, he does not perceive time and space or name and form, the offspring of Maya. Whatever is within the domain of Maya is unreal. Give it up. Destroy the prison house of name and form and rush out of it with the strength of a lion. Dive deep in search of the self and realize it through Samadhi. You will find the world of name and form vanishing into void and the puny ego dissolving in Brahman consciousness. You will realize your identity with Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. Quoting the Upanishad, Totapuri said, "That knowledge is shallow by which one sees or hears or knows another. What is shallow is worthless and can never give real felicity. But the knowledge by which one does not see another or hear another or know another, which is beyond duality, is great, and through such knowledge one attains the infinite bliss. How can the mind and senses grasp that which shines in the heart of all as the eternal subject?" Totapuri asked the disciple to withdraw his mind from all objects of the relative world, including the gods and goddesses, and to concentrate on the absolute. But the task was not easy even for Sri Ramakrishna. He found it impossible to take his mind beyond Kali, the divine mother of the universe. After the initiation, Sri Ramakrishna once said, describing the event, Nangta began to teach me the various conclusions of the Advaita Vedanta and asked me to withdraw the mind completely from all objects and dive deep into the Atman. But in spite of all my attempts, I could not altogether cross the realm of name and form and bring my mind to the unconditioned state. I had no difficulty in taking the mind from all the objects of the world, but the radiant and too familiar figure of the blissful mother, the embodiment of the essence of pure consciousness, appeared before me as a living reality. Her bewitching smile prevented me from passing into the great beyond. Again and again I tried, but she stood in my way every time. In despair, I said to Nangta, It is hopeless. I cannot raise my mind to the unconditioned state and come face to face with Atman. He grew excited and sharply said, What? You can't do it? But you have to. He cast his eyes around. Finding a piece of glass, he took it up and stuck it between my eyebrows. Concentrate the mind on this point, he thundered. Then, with stern determination, I again sat to meditate. As soon as the gracious form of the Divine Mother appeared before me, I used my discrimination as a sword and with it clove her in two. The last barrier fell. My spirit at once soared beyond the relative plane and I lost myself in samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna remained completely absorbed in samadhi for 3 days. Is it really true? Totapuri cried out in astonishment. Is it possible that he has attained in a single day what it took me 40 years of strenuous practice to achieve? Great God, it is nothing short of a miracle. With the help of Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's mind finally came down to the relative plane. Totapuri, a monk of the most orthodox type, never stayed at a place more than 3 days, but he remained at Dakshineshwar 11 months. He too had something to learn. Totapuri had no idea of the struggles of ordinary men in the toils of passion and desire. Having maintained all through life the guilelessness of a child, he laughed at the idea of a man's being led astray by the senses. He was convinced that the world was Maya and had only to be denounced to vanish forever. A born non-dualist, he had no faith in a personal God. He did not believe in the terrible aspect of Kali, much less in her benign aspect. Music and the chanting of God's holy name were to him only so much nonsense. He ridiculed the spending of emotion on the worship of a personal God.